And our fourth story out front, Vice President Joe Biden came out in defense of the administration's stance on Iran more forcefully today than ever, talking to a group of rabbis.
When we took office, let me remind you, there was virtually no international pressure on Iran. We were the problem. We were diplomatically isolated in the world, in the region. By going the extra diplomatic mile, presenting Iran with a clear choice, we demonstrated to the region and to the world that Iran is the problem, not the United States.
The Israeli government making a surprise announcement today also. They're not going to hold elections, and they've got a new government. And you know what that means? Well, here's what headline writers around the world have said. In the Jerusalem Post, they say a new balance at the cabinet on Iran. They say Netanyahu's tightening up the ranks. Haaretz saying Mufaz Netanyahu, cabinet may pave the way for an Israeli strike on Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told me that no options are off the table. When I asked him how he knows what Iran is doing, he gave an ominous pause and said, oh, I know. All right, but all of this talk could mean the U.S. could get forced into action. Here's the vice president again today, leaving no doubt on where America's loyalty stands.
American support for Israel's security is not just an act of friendship and a moral obligation. It's in the fundamental national interest of the United States of America.
Out front tonight, Peter Beinart, author of The Crisis of Zionism, and Patrick Clausen, research director at the Washington Institute. Peter, let me start with you. Strong words from the vice president. In your book, you talk about the pressure the Obama administration is under from very prominent and influential Jewish lobbying groups in this country to come out strong, not just in favor of Israel, which has all kinds of dispute about what to do here, but in favor of Benjamin Netanyahu's views, particularly on strikes.
Well, I think to be fair to the American Jewish organizations, they're not explicitly in favor of military action. What they have pushed for is tougher sanctions. I don't think sanctions in and of themselves are a bad thing. I think the question is, what are they for? Sanctions are not an end in and of itself. It seems to me the sanctions have to be coupled with smart diplomacy so that we pressure the Iranians to the point where we can ultimately get a deal that stops them from getting a nuclear weapon. And
do you worry, though, that the rhetoric here continues to rise and rise, that you could end up in a position where nobody wants to strike, but they might end up having to, not just to save face, perhaps, but because if you don't, you do look weak and you do lose credibility, that rhetoric gets out of control?
Well, I think you're right. There is this danger that war could spiral out of control through some accidental means. But I think the administration has actually done a good job of putting the Iranians in a position now where the Iranians are actually willing